So hey guys, welcome to the Dream Lab. Glad you could join us this month. We're going to start with a dream from my friend Jay. He was just telling us about a dream that he had about Todd White. So Jay, why don't you come on up and share your dream?
Okay. Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. I had this dream on January 22nd of 2018. I was going into some building and Todd White was coming out. There were concrete steps going into the building. I said, "Hey Todd, what's up?" I started talking to him and he sat down on the steps to talk to me. During the conversation, I said, "I'd love to be able to talk more," and he said, "Here, let me give you my number." He started writing it down on a piece of paper that I had a whole bunch of scribbled stuff. I said, "Why don't I give you a quick call so you have my number in your phone?" And then I'm not sure really what happened, but I think his number was missing the last digit when he was writing it down, and I'm not sure if I got the paper or not. I was thinking, how am I going to get in touch with him? It'd probably be really hard to get him by email or contacting his ministry. It went into another scene. I was in a mall with a guy and two girls. We were talking about a bunch of different things upstairs by the railing. And I said to the guy, who was my friend, I said to the guy, who's my friend, I think I met Todd White a little while ago. I was then going to say, actually I met him in 2014 walking out of a conference when I told him he had a cool shirt, but I had no idea who he was until the next day he was speaking. I ended up not saying any of that because after I mentioned his name, the two girls got very quiet and they started to listen. I felt kind of weird and self-conscious, so I didn't get into the story that much. Then after talking to a bunch of different stuff about the girls, said we got to get going, but we love to hang out, so let's exchange phone numbers. They were doing something weird with their phones that I wasn't familiar with, like putting the phones towards each other, and the numbers were transferring through the air, I guess. I went to take mine out, but it wasn't working right. My friend said his iPhone hasn't been working properly, and I said, wait, because they were leaving and I didn't get my phone to work. And I felt kind of weird, like left out or like defective or something. Then the girls left and they started walking to the left of where we were sitting, and I noticed there were some bags there. So I stayed and I said, hey, someone left some bags. I think one might be one of the girls. I then noticed 3 black leather pouches, like the size of a small phone pouch that the phones used to be, people would wear them that way. I remembered we were talking about them for some reason, maybe business or something, I'm not sure. I was thinking they didn't even really care about them, even though they seemed so interested before. They were sort of scattered around. There were 2 by the railing and 1 by the chair. I also noticed that the place where we were sitting was a complete mess. There were chairs all around, food, popcorn on the floor, and it was real messy. So I started putting the chairs back together and organizing and cleaning them up. Then one of the girls was coming back like she had forgotten to talk to someone and was walking fast by us going towards the grocery store, which was Wallbombs. The strange thing about this was that in real life, Wallbombs was connected to a mall that I used to go to hang out a lot as a teenager, but the mall we were in was not that mall. It was very small, and the mall we were in was very huge. And the thing that I got confused about in the beginning was what I wanted to say to Todd was, hey, have you ever thought of using dream interpretation in your ministry to reach people? That was kind of what I was thinking, but I
Never got to.
Yeah, I never got to.
All right, so let's make sure that I'm remembering the dream correctly. Because it's fun, and we're going to be working through the dream, so we're going to have to remember it. So, a nice thing, you guys on the camera, you can just pause and rewind and replay and pause and rewind. It makes it a lot easier for you guys. But so starting out, you are outside of a building that Todd White is walking out of, concrete steps, and as he's walking out, you start talking to him, interacting with them. Hey, good to meet you, connect. You're thinking in the back of my mind, I need to ask him about dream interpretation with evangelism. You never actually get to, but you're like, hey, let's exchange phone numbers so that we can stay in touch. And he's writing down his phone number on a piece of paper, and it's got a bunch of scribbles on it. And you're thinking, well, I need to maybe try to call him so that way he has my number. But when you're looking at this piece of paper, it looks like he's left out one number and now he's gone and there's nothing really you can do about it. You're like, am I going to be able to connect with him? Am I not going to be able to connect with him? Scene switches. You are now in a mall with a friend and you're talking to these 2 ladies. and just kind of chatting, having conversation, and you're telling them about how you had met Todd White at some point in time. And it had been in a conference in 2014. He was walking out. You're like, hey, dude, nice shirt. And then you didn't know who it was. But then the next day he was speaking. You realize, oh, hey, that was Todd White. And that was kind of cool. They get all quiet, like they're kind of impressed or something odd is going on. And so you don't tell the rest of the story about just having met him, just because of how weird it was. And everybody's exchanging numbers. And it's like they're holding their phones to each other and things are going wirelessly. You're trying to pull out your phone, but your iPhone is kind of broken. Your friend says, oh yeah, his iPhone's kind of broken. And you're trying to figure out how to get it to work, how to get the numbers, but you never actually get the numbers. And you're feeling like you're missing out on something, like you're not quite connecting the way that you want to connect, that there's something going on. And they're getting ready to leave. So they take off. And as they're taking off, you notice that where they walk, that there's a couple bags that are sitting there kind of on chairs or something. And you're like, hey, somebody forgot their bags. I wonder if one of them is one of these girls. And then you notice these 3 leather pouches that kind of look like the old holders that you would put a cell phone in a while back, like from a different time period. And as you're still there and you're kind of talking, the girls, one of the girls or both of the girls are coming back, or one of them. One of them is coming back, and they're moving very intently, like they're going to see somebody. And you notice they're going past you to this grocery store, which is Wabom's.
Wabom's, yeah.
Which you actually know from Waking Life, because when you were a teenager, there was a Wabom's that was connected to a mall that you used to go to when you were a teenager. But this mall is not that mall. It's much bigger than that mall was, even though it's still connected. And you're realizing this in the dream, that there's a difference. And that's basically where the dream is.
Yeah, you remember the dream better than I did.
Okay. That's good. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Very good. So this is what we're going to do. If you need to pause and rewind your video and rewatch that, please feel free to do that. But take a moment, pause the video, and figure out what's the title of this dream. What would you title this if this was your dream, if you were trying to interpret it? What's the focus? What are the sub-focuses? What are the details? And then come up with an interpretation of the dream. And when you're ready, start the video back again, and we'll let you know what we got here in the lab. Well, welcome back to the Dream Lab. See, the fun thing is, we have no idea how long you had the video paused to figure this dream out, and you have no idea how long we had the video paused to figure this dream out. Now, this is a fun dream, because anytime you have a long dream, it's always hard just to stay with the main parts of the dream and not get caught up in the details. And so the shorter the dream is, the easier it is, because there's less details to get caught up in. But there's so many things that are interesting when you have a long dream like this. So let's start out with a main piece. What are we going to title this one? Communication and connection. Okay. And who or what is the focus of the dream?
Dreamer.
The dreamer. Yes. Now, whenever you have a dream that has more than one scene, I find it very helpful with the diagram to keep the scenes in different places on the diagram. So 2 scenes is the easiest. I keep one scene on one side and the other scene on the other side. It just helps it to stay clear, because if you start to muddle up, is that the right word? All of a sudden I'm saying that and it doesn't sound like a real word. If you muddle up the elements and you start mixing elements from the first scene and elements with the second scene together, it's like taking words out of 2 different sentences and trying to combine them. It completely loses meaning. So each scene is its own sentence. And so you've got to let it sit on its own. It becomes a sentence. Then the next scene is another sentence. So on the first scene, what is our important details or elements, sub-focuses? Todd White. Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, and anything else?
Cell phone.
Yeah. The phone. And specifically the phone number. Anything else that's important on that? Details.
Yeah, what he didn't communicate, what he couldn't communicate.
Yeah. So the paper, the note that had all the other stuff on it, and then the question of, do I actually have the number? Is this everything that I need? That is a big detail that's important in that. Anything else in the first scene that's important? Hey, second scene, what are our sub-focuses there?
The girls.
The girls. Okay. What else?
Mall.
The mall. What else?
The phones again.
Yeah, the phones again.
And the 3 old pouches, leather pouches.
Okay, so anything else?
It seems like the grocery store.
Yeah, how do you spell that name?
Oh, Waldbaum's Waldbaums.
B-A-U-M-S. Didn't quite fit on there, but close enough. Yes, that is a detail that brings in a piece of the understanding that's important to the understanding of this dream. Yeah. You always look for patterns, especially when you have 2 scenes or 3 scenes in the same dream. Do you see something repeated? Phone number, don't really have it. Phone number, don't have it. That repeated pattern tells you what's the main thing that's being communicated in the dream. So that's kind of the key thing, which we already have in our title, like our main thing that's being communicated. So now let's go back through. Todd White, what would Todd White represent?
Evangelism.
I'm sorry? Evangelism, yes. And what would phone represent?
Communication.
Communication.
Connection. Right?
Yeah. Communication, which is an element of relationship. Right, because wanting to continue to connect, it's not just the information that's being communicated, but the ability to stay connected. So that's why communication and connection, those are tied together. Now, this is a real fun one, because if you have your dream dictionary, one of the things that we talk a lot at different dreams that we've done is you've got a wireless phone, it usually represents prayer. But in this dream, that doesn't fit at all. That's not at all what it means. And so you've got to allow the context of the dream help you to understand what the element means in that particular dream. All right, and so then the paper with the question mark, what is that?
Unclear message.
It's unclear. It's an inability to connect. So if the phone represents communication and connection, that leaves with, are we really going to connect? Are we able to connect? It's that question mark over communication and connection. That's the main thing. All right, then we move into the mall and everything that's going on in the mall. Now, what part of the mall was it? The food court, correct?
Near the food court. That's
Were you
It
near
may
the
have been near
food?
the food court. I just remember it was by a corridor.
By a corridor. Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I
Like there was
thought I
popcorn
remembered
around.
you saying
yeah,
food
that-
court, but you didn't say that.
don't-
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why it's good to clarify. Okay. So then we'll just leave that piece out. It was more about the mall. The fact that that was in a public place, it was in a mall. Now, to understand what the mall represents in this dream, that's why the Waldbaums becomes important. What did that remind him of?
Something in his past.
When he was a teenager, right? When he was a teenager. So this is anchoring this back into that time period. So this is showing a pattern, current time, previous time, a pattern, and where the root was. Do you see how that comes together?
Yeah.
Yeah. So teenage years. And again, think about those pouches that you would have the phones on. About how long ago was that?
Yeah.
Was that around the same time period?
A long time ago.
That was a long time ago. So it's drawing it back to something that's in the past. So this is not one of those dreams where the first dream is the first sentence and the second dream is the second sentence. This is one of those dreams where the first scene is saying, this is what it looks like now. The second scene is saying, this is the root of it. This is the pattern that you're seeing that's going on. This is how it's affecting you right now, but this is the same thing that's happened in the past. Now, you say that because of the exact same issue being repeated in both scenes. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The phone not really connecting. Well, I can't really connect. The inability to connect, that relationship issue. All right. So, you have in this dream, you kind of have two different categories of dreams that are coming together. Anybody guess which categories?
Self-condition.
Self-condition?
Calling.
Calling, exactly. Self-conditioned dream and a calling dream. The calling dream, and then the dream is showing this is something that can end up hindering that calling. And this is where the root is. So it's not just saying this is the potential, this is where it's going, but it's saying this is what can stop it. Now you know, so now you can deal with it. Does that make sense? All right. So, see how if you get too caught up in the details, you can miss some of the nuances of this dream. This is a fun one. Who wants to give a stab in communicating this to the dreamer? All right, come on up, Alan.
So Jay, you have a heart for evangelism. I believe is what this dream may be speaking to you. You have a heart for evangelism and maybe using dream interpretation in evangelism. And God's just putting his finger on an issue that may be a stumbling block or an obstacle that he wants you to address, and he wants to help you address. And that is the being able to connect with people in communication and relationship in order to make this happen. Because God wants you; He's your biggest cheerleader. He wants this to happen for you, and He wants you. In fact, He's the one that's giving you this desire. But He's just putting his finger on an issue about connecting and relationship and communication. That if you resolve this issue, then you'll be able to move forward into that calling.
Yeah. That's awesome. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? Do you see that? Now, I know enough about Jay that his heart is all about evangelism out on the streets and integrating prophetic evangelism into that. But this is showing that insecurity issue that started at that time period can hinder that from having the impact that it's supposed to have going long term. So, and this is where a knowledge of God's ways and God's character is so important. Because the dream interpretation says you have a calling to prophetic evangelism. This is an issue that can hinder that, can affect that. Understanding God's ways, God's showing that because he doesn't want it to. And so the way Alan brought that out and brought out that encouragement in the midst of it was a really good way of bringing God's heart into it without changing what the dream was saying. So we talk in the Understanding Dreams and Visions course about flipping a dream, where it's saying one thing, but you flip it with God's perspective. That doesn't mean changing the dream. It means bringing in God's perspective so that the dreamer's left with what God would want them to be left with. Now, there's flipping a dream where you have a demonic dream and then you go the opposite. The dream says this, but we know that's not God, and so this is the truth. In this dream, it's not that. This is saying, hey, this is an issue God's pointing out because his heart, his desire is to bring you into this place where you have great impact. I mean, think about the impact that Todd White has in bringing evangelism out onto the streets. You have potential for great impact. That's the connection you have. That's what God's desire is. This little thing that started back then can hinder that, but it doesn't have to. Yeah, so that it's beautiful how God does that, but making sure you have that communication. Because if you don't bring in that piece, then what you do is you take a dream like this and the person leaves with hopelessness, which is not godly. Right? That's not the heart of God. That's where we're bringing in the 1 Corinthians 13. Right? You can be the most accurate dream interpreter in the world, but if you do not have love, it's worthless. Like, this is a beautiful application of that scripture to the process of dream application. So, very good. Yeah, well, thank you guys. Guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Dream Lab.